If your factory is a sea of yellow lights, you might be struggling to get it balanced. In this modular frame factory, the assembler needs 12 rods per minute, but each constructor makes 15. Left like this, your constructor will be unused 20% of the time. That will lead to power fluctuations, broken breakers, and backups all over the place. To solve this, you can build additional machines to equalize the input and the output. By computing the least common multiple, you can build the perfect quantity. In our example, the least common multiple of 12 and 15 is 60. So our target is 60 rods per minute. The assembler needs 12 rods, so build 5. The constructor makes 15 rods, so build 4, thus making our input and output equal. That will turn our sea of yellow lights into a satisfactory green that we're aiming for. Have you ever had to equally split a conveyor into a large number of machines? Splitters are built for just 2 or 3 outputs, so how do we calculate what combination of splitters to use to get a balanced output? Most can be solved using prime factors. Let's take this coal generating array I built not long ago. I needed to split one conveyor with coal into 12 individual lines. So let's work it out using prime factors. The prime factors of 12 are 3, 2, and 2. Since our splitters can handle up to 3 outputs, this will work great. We split our conveyor into 3 lines, then each line into 2, and then into 2 again. Now we have 12 equal outputs. Load balancing is already difficult enough when you have to split a single conveyor into 12 or more lines, but how do you split it evenly when you have to split it into the oddest of numbers, a prime number? If you need to feed 5, 7, 11, 13, or maybe higher, how do you handle breaking it down evenly? The answer is by using a prime splitter array. The concept is simple. Build a splitter using prime factors of your target number plus 1. In this example, we need to split our conveyor into 5 machines. So we build an array that splits our input into 6 lines, then take the extra output line and feed it back into the starting conveyor. This distributes the extra items back to the original 5 outputs. I love a good load balancer. It precisely divides the right number of items to the right machine just in time. It helps take any number of inputs into the right number of outputs, but it does have drawbacks. It can be bulky, they have to be completely rebuilt if you need to add or subtract a single machine. So what other options are there? Manifolds are the opposite of the load balancer. They use a single conveyor to merge all the items together and send them to each machine in order. The downside? A factory with a lot of manifolds can take a long time to spin up, as each machine in order has to overload before sending the excess items downstream. The upside? A compact distribution system that looks great. If your factory is at risk of shutting down because of power fluctuations, the easiest way to smooth out your power usage is by changing the clock speed of your machines. This feature is available early in the game. Once you unlock the MAM and harvest your first power slug, use the MAM to research power slugs and then research overclock production. Now you can underclock, slow down, or overclock, speed up any machine in your factory. For every shard you use, you can overclock the machine another 50%. Mix and match overclocking and underclocking to perfectly balance your factory and smooth out your power usage. Have you ever needed to balance the number of items on multiple conveyors? Conveyor balancers might be an excellent solution for you. Let's demonstrate with a 2x3 balancer, which takes 2 inputs, A and B, into 3 outputs, 1, 2, and 3. The simple solution would be to merge the 2 inputs and then split it into 3 equal outputs. But if the combination overloads the merged belt, you need this second solution. Let's reverse the mergers and splitters. Split each input conveyor into belts equal to the number of outputs. This ensures that no belt is overloaded. In our case, we split each input into 3 outputs. Then we merge 1 belt from each input belt, so we merge A1 with B1. That becomes one of the outputs. Do that for each of the outputs, and you have a perfectly balanced conveyor. If you're building a mega factory and have multiple sources of the same item, you might have a bunch of conveyors that aren't entirely full, which leads to wasted space and inefficient design. How do you fix that? Conveyor compressors help by merging all items into one conveyor line until it is full, and then sending the remainder into another. The basic layout is very simple. Take your first two inputs and attach a smart splitter to them. Set one output to any, another output to overflow. Now merge the two any outputs. This line will always be full. Then merge the two overflow lines. This will be your remainder. If you have another line to be compressed, repeat the design using the previous overflow remainder as an input. Now your factory can hum along at maximum capacity. If you're just getting started in Satisfactory, the unequal output of resource nodes might be a little confusing. Why does one node give you 30 items per minute and another give a lot more? The resource nodes come in 3 purities: impure, normal, and pure. Each purity doubles the previous output. Impure starts at 30, then normal at 60, and pure at 120. This is true if you're using Mark I miners. Upgrading the miner to Mark II doubles your output to 60, 120, and 240 items per minute. Eventually you'll get to Mark III miners, which double output again. Overclock a Mark III, and you can max out any conveyor in the game. How do you go from building small-scale rat-tail factories to building mega factories without getting tied up in spaghetti? The basic building block of the mega factory is the manifold lane, which helps you to scale up while minimizing the extensive conveyors that eventually get you all tangled up. Manifold lanes are simple. It involves 2 rows of constructors or other production buildings, and 3 manifolds that feed them. First, build the 2 rows of constructors with about a single tile between them. Then build a manifold by creating a row of mergers and send their output back to where the raw materials enter. Last, build the 2 manifolds along the outside to feed the raw materials into the constructors. To make things quicker, build this inside the blueprint designer for fast deployment. Each of these lanes is only limited by the capacity of your conveyors. I've written a lot of tips on how to balance and perfect your factories. Balancers, compressors, overclocking, underclocking, I've hit them all. But there's one thing I haven't really covered. Why? Because it's cheating. Smart splitters unclogged your backed up lines, let you ignore unbalanced factories, sort items on your conveyor because you sent all your items to the same storage container. Seriously, who does that? So here's how they work. Interact with a smart splitter to bring up the UI. To prevent backups, set one lane to any so it acts as normal output. Set another to overflow and send that conveyor to an awesome sink. To filter your dirty conveyors, set one lane to item and then set the item for it to grab from the belt. Make sure you set the other outputs to any undefined if you want to use that option though. So there, the smart splitter does it all. Programmable splitters are the big brother to the smart splitter. Like the smart splitter before it, the programmable splitter allows you to decide what to do with each output. The upgrade? Now you can add up to 64 filters. But who needs more than one on each output? Well, the only use I've seen is what is called sushi load balancing. Instead of running multiple conveyors into a production building, you can give the exact quantity you need of each item for each building. First, merge the items onto one conveyor. You must provide exactly the right quantity for your recipe. Then, add a programmable splitter and add each item to the output you want to use. Then connect up your outputs and voila, you've created sushi, or something like that. Whether you're pumping water to your coal generators or extracting crude oil for fuel and plastics, you may find that your fluid just isn't flowing. Your pipelines are half empty and your machines are idle, no matter how many pumps you use. A quick solution for this is to build a water tower. Just after your extractor, build a vertical pipe that goes higher than any of your builds. You may need to use a pipeline pump to get the fluid to the top. If so, pay attention to the blue ring showing how high the pump can send the fluid. Unlike a normal water tower, you don't need to put a buffer at the top of the tower. Simply turn the pipe around and go back down. From here on, any pipe lower than the top of the tower will never need a pump again. I think trains might be the best part of Satisfactory. The animation, the sound design, they're just great. But how do we go from one loop to a massive train station with track switching and multiple trains? We have two tools to use. The block signal divides the track into blocks. Any train approaching a new block will stop if the next block is occupied. It's great for having multiple trains on the same track. But how do we handle junctions? That's where path signals come in. A path signal is like a block signal, but does one thing better. It closes only the specific path that is needed on a block. Place a path signal at every entrance to the junction and a block signal at every exit, and soon you'll have a grand central station of your own. One of the biggest constraints in Satisfactory isn't items or space, but power. Having enough electricity to keep your factory running is not easy. But there's a secret to eking out a little more efficiency from your factory that you may be overlooking. When underclocking and overclocking a production machine, the amount of items produced increases linearly. But the amount of power consumed does not. It increases exponentially. This means that at half speed, each item produced takes 20% less power. That also means that if you double the speed, it takes 25% more power per item. But here's a good rule of thumb. If you need to balance a system, try underclocking first. Your power grid will thank you. When I first started Satisfactory, I hated constantly rebuilding machines when the conveyor belts just wouldn't line up. Luckily, foundations are one of the first items you can unlock. They help you build on a level platform, let you line up machines nicely, and give you the canvas you need to build a good factory. By default, you're given 3 sizes of platforms: 1 meter, 2 meter, and 4 meter. While you can rotate these foundations to face any direction, if you hold down Control, it will align to the world grid, which will ensure that distant factories will match nicely if you ever connect them. When using the world grid, skip the 1 meter platform. Since they are snapped based on the center height of a platform, 1 meter grids will always be off. To build faster, press R, which will swap you into Zoop mode, and you can then build up to 10 foundations at once. After playing Satisfactory for a while, you'll realize how massive factories can get. Building the same manifold design over and over can get tedious, but thankfully we have the Blueprint Designer. The Blueprint Designer lets us create and save any set of buildings within a 32 meter cubed area. Then you can build it all at once with the Build tool. But there are a few caveats and hidden features that we don't want to miss. First, conveyors and pipes will not link up automatically. Leave space for the final linkage and connect them once it's built. Second, blueprints don't snap well to the world grid. So don't include the foundation in your blueprint, but instead build foundations first and place the blueprint on top. But the best feature? You can find blueprints in your save folder and transfer them between games. Built the perfect manifold? Share it with a blueprint. One of the biggest improvements to my game was building a mall, a place where I stored every item in the game. Instead of wasting hours gathering materials for my next build, I could head to the mall and grab what I need and go. But how do you build a mall without making spaghetti that would make an Italian grandmother jealous? I use what I call a multiplex manifold. It's tileable and features overflow protection for filtered and unfiltered items. It allows for additional item insertion at any point. The first row of the manifold is a smart splitter. Set the filtered item to go right and undefined forward. Send the filtered item into another smart splitter with the same filter and overflow going left. Send the filtered line into a storage container. On top of the second row, place a merger to be the overflow line. Merge the overflows. At the end of the manifold, send the final overflow line into a sink, and your mall will run perfectly forever. If I had to pick the most challenging item to manage in Satisfactory, it'd be screws. Why? Because you need tons of them. Reinforced iron plates, you need 60 per minute. Rotors, 100. Heavy modular frames, 200. Screws are notorious for clogging conveyors. Veteran pioneers know the first fix: cast screws. It's one of the top recommended alternative recipes. But that's just one level of solving the screw problem. While the cast screws are useful, the steel screws make them faster without taking up nearly as much space or power in your factory. It takes 16 constructors to fully load a conveyor with cast screws, but only 4 with steel screws. Still not enough? With alternative recipes, you can eliminate screws entirely from any item. Build Caterium computers, heavy encased frames, adhered iron plates, and copper rotors. And remember, if you're not screwed, you're doing something right. Isn't it cute? The lizard doggo, I mean. They're a bit skittish, but surprisingly useful. If you've been playing a while, I'm sure you've heard of taming them. Tamed doggos can be named and will occasionally bring you items. Here's how to make one your new best friend. When you spot a doggo, freeze. If it notices you, remove your blade runners if you've got them on, and drop a paleberry on the ground. Stay still, and with some luck, the doggo will wander over and eat the treat. When it does, press E to pet it, and congratulations, you've got a new friend. You can open its inventory to give it a name, and every now and then it'll bring you something it found. But beware, sometimes it brings back uranium, which is highly radioactive and can't be trashed. Best to stash that somewhere far, far away. So handle with care, or you might find yourself in a rough situation. One of the worst feelings in Satisfactory is hearing that dreaded fuse blow, followed by an hour of scrambling to get the power back on. But with power switches, you can avoid that chaos and keep things running smoothly. A power switch toggles a section of your factory on or off. Just connect your grid to side A and the isolated section to side B. Now, the real game changer is the priority power switch. It not only allows remote control, but lets you assign priority levels to each section. Less important sections shut down first, while crucial systems like power plants keep running. Setting it up is easy. Name each switch so you don't accidentally cut off the wrong section, and adjust priority levels with a simple click and drag. Now you can keep your factory efficient and avoid those heart-stopping moments when everything goes dark. As you leave early game at the end of Tier 2, transporting a lot of resources becomes essential. Instead of stretching conveyors across the map, try the truck station. Truck stations allow you to load a tractor with up to 25 stacks of items and send it on a pre-planned route to be unloaded elsewhere. Connect the truck station to the resource and fuel. Coal works early on, but longer routes may need denser energy sources such as packaged fuel or batteries. To set up a route, get into the tractor just before the truck station. Open the record menu and start recording. Drive to the station and unload with F. Then head to the unload station and repeat the process. Finish the loop to end the route. Name it and turn on autopilot. Hop out and get on to Tier 3. There's nothing quite as disheartening and satisfactory as a conveyor spaghetti nightmare. But don't worry, there are ways to keep those belts neat and tidy. First, plan more space than you think you need. Machines should take up no more than half of your factory floor. Leave room for conveyors, paths, and future expansion. Second, use vertical space to your advantage. Move belts to upper floors or lower levels, freeing up valuable space. Use stackable conveyor poles to keep them aligned and out of the way. Finally, designate input and output areas. By isolating your input to a single area in the factory, you create a more efficient bus that will route them to where they need to go. By following these tips, you not only avoid conveyor chaos, but also create a factory that's a pleasure to work in. Manifolds are one of the best ways to build large-scale factories in Satisfactory. But how do you build a compact manifold for assemblers or manufacturers? For assemblers, use a double manifold layout that's 5 foundations wide. Place the assemblers at the edge of the boundary and align a splitter with the first input port. Stack 2 splitters in line with the second port, then disassemble the lower one. Connect your conveyors to complete the setup. For manufacturers, start with a base of 6 foundations wide. Build 4 stackable conveyor poles at each end and connect them with conveyor belts. Place splitters on each belt, aligning them with each of the manufacturer's ports. Use lifts to connect each port to its corresponding splitter. For full blueprints, join my Discord. If you've embraced using truck stations in Satisfactory like I have, you'll have a great time building a network of roads across the map. But building good roads can be quite difficult. Here are a few tricks to keep your convoys on track. Start with 4-meter foundations to build your roads above rocks and small terrain obstacles that can throw your vehicles off course. When it's time to change elevations, use 1 or 2-meter ramps. Anything steeper and your vehicles won't be able to climb them. Next, use the blueprinter to speed things up. Blueprint straights, intersections, and curves. Finally, build on the world grid to keep your routes straight and consistent, making your road network neat, organized, and easy to expand in the future. With these tips, your transport network will be so smooth that even your virtual drivers might ask for a raise. I love using manifolds in Satisfactory. They're efficient and compact. But at higher tiers, the long startup times become a problem. For example, a manifold that makes iron rods with Mark IV conveyors will fill 32 constructors. It takes over a half an hour to get it full. With Mark V or VI belts, it could take hours to reach full production. So what's the solution? Use a hybrid manifold. Hybrid manifolds use lower tier conveyors to fill machines in parallel instead of in sequence. To build one, create a branch off your main line using a conveyor that's a tier lower than your max speed. Complete the branch like a normal manifold, then keep branching until you have the needed machine count. With a hybrid manifold, your production lines ramp up much faster, letting you hit full capacity in record time.